So we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. My name is Roseanne Hassett. I am the Executive Director for the American Civil Defense Association. Before we begin, I'm obligated to read our disclaimer. Nothing in this presentation should be considered legal, medical, or financial advice. The opinions of the viewers can differ considerably and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of TACDA. You should always do your own research and consult with professionals. The format tonight is informal. We'd like to allow questions on the fly, so answers will be in context. And feel free also to use the chat feature, and we'll do our best to get those answered as they come up. The topic for our meeting tonight is an intro to CERT, which is Community Emergency Response Training. Our speaker is Kimberly Hornberger from the Sandy, Utah Fire Department. And Kimberly, thank you so much for being here. We're excited to hear from you. And I
Excited to be
will
here.
turn the time over to you now.
Okay, hello everyone. I am excited to be here. Just a little bit about myself. I am from Utah, live in Orem, which is about 30 to an hour away, depending on the traffic, from Sandy City Fire Department. I've worked here for 10 years. I am the education supervisor. So I do all the education for the fire department. That means that I teach CERT, I teach CPR, I do the summer camps for kids. We go into all the schools. We have 22 elementary schools, 5 junior highs, and 2 high schools. And we go into all the grades and do a separate program for each grade. We also do fall program for seniors and how to not fall. We talk about how to have a healthier lifestyle. So I do a lot of education. I graduated from Brigham Young University and lived in China and Taiwan for a few years. And so I also know Mandarin and I have a giant family. So that's a little bit about me. I'm excited to be here and to introduce CERT. I'm sure that a lot of you have probably heard of CERT, taken it 18 years ago. Very good. I see your badge there. That's awesome. So I hope to have a little bit of an introduction to it. I want to have it be some fun things as well as a general introduction. So I hope it can also be interactive. As we get started, I just also wanted to say I know that you've probably noticed I do have a shroud over my badge. We did have a firefighter that passed away uh, a couple days ago. So that is something that we wear in honor of our firefighters that have passed away until their funeral. So just so that in case you're curious and wondering what it is, that is the reason why I have a shroud over my badge. So let's get started. We are first going to talk about a little bit about what CERT is. I want to go over what it is, what it's not, and kind of give a general introduction to it. Then we're going to talk about kind of the units, what we talk about in each unit, what the program focuses on. And then I want to give you a quick glance. I picked one, sometimes two, because I got excited about my favorite things from each unit. So I want to share just a couple of those tips and tricks that I enjoy, and hopefully they're helpful to you. So, to start, I want to read a quote from this book. If you've never read it, I would recommend it. It's by Amanda Ripley called The Unthinkable: Who Survives a Disaster and Why. It's fascinating. She goes through tons of different disasters and the reasons why people survive and the reasons why things happened the way that they did. But she gives this quote. She's talking about this disaster. And she says, these days, we tend to think of disasters as acts of God and government. Regular people only feature as equation in the equation as victims, which is a shame because regular people are the most important people at a disaster scene every time. In 1992, a series of sewer explosions caused by a gas leak ripped through Guadalajara, Mexico, which is Mexico's second largest city. The violence came from below, rupturing neighborhoods block by block. Starting at 10:30 a.m., at least 9 separate explosions ripped open a jagged trench more than a mile long. About 300 people died. Some 5,000 houses were razed. The Mexican army was called in. Rescuers from California raced to help. Search and rescue dogs were ordered up. But first, before anyone else, regular people were on the scene saving one another. They did incredible things, these regular people. They lifted rubble off survivors with car jacks. They used garden hoses to force air into voids where people were trapped. In fact, as in most disasters, the vast majority of rescues were done by ordinary folks. After the first 2 hours, very few people came out of the debris alive. The search and rescue dogs did not arrive until 26 hours after the explosion. I like to use that to begin because that is what CERT is about. It is about being that person that's there and knows what to do. A lot of times people get nervous when disasters happen of, oh my gosh, what do I do? What happens? What if? And what what is the most beneficial? And so CERT is about teaching you how to respond in safe ways and how to respond within the city system so that your help can be the most beneficial. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about what CERT looks like nationally. There is a CERT organization, and I'm going to talk a little bit, just a little bit more about it in a moment. This organization allows CERT to function within a city, and it allows the helpers to be organized because a lot of times in disasters, if we look at Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Helene, all of these disasters that happened, one of the most important things is to get the helpers organized and to get the helpers, okay, we need this happening so that someone is not doing the exact same thing as someone else and duplicating effort so that we can be spread out and know that we're helping the most amount of people. With that, it is working within the system so that people are not going rogue. Is that a nice way to say that? So that we don't have people setting up their own systems or doing things unsafely or advising other people to do things unsafely. It's a lot of life skills, which is something I like about CERT because it's a lot about being flexible and adaptable. It's not necessarily, okay, here is this medically branded thing that you have to use in order to help someone, but here are some creative and adaptive ways that you can use the things you already have around you to help someone. Something I really like to tell all of my CERT classes is don't want you to take this class and think that now you have to spend thousands of dollars in order to be prepared for your whole neighborhood. That's not the purpose of this. I want you to be able to find things that work to put your money in the most important parts, but not to feel like you have to go crazy. With that, This slide I know is specific to Sandy here in Utah, but the numbers are pretty typical across the United States. So in Sandy, we have 95,000 citizens, and at any one time, there are about 20 firefighters on duty. So if you think about that in relation to you, that is going to be a little bit if when there is a major disaster before more help can come to you. It's going to be a little bit before us as firefighters can come to you. Something people don't realize is they assume that the system is going to come and rescue. And as firefighters, after a major disaster, what we would do is we drive across the city and we do what's called a windshield survey. What that means is that we are looking at each house and we're saying, okay, here's like the major areas of concern. Here are things that need help, but we can't help at this moment. They can wait. And here are things that need help, but it's going to be a lot down the road. So it's basically a triage. It's a triage of the city. Something else people don't realize is the first place that firefighters are going to go are to the big public buildings. If it's during school, we're going to the school buildings. If it is during a business day, we're going to go to those major business buildings where there are hundreds and thousands of people at work before we're ever going to get to those houses. That means you can be on your own for days at a time. So with CERT, it's very much what can I do until more help can come? How can I use the resources that I have so that I am prepared when that happens? Just a general overview of what CERT looks like. We talk about the different types of disasters that can happen because there's a lot of different disasters that happen. And I know that you guys talk about all of those different types of disasters. So we go into, okay, here are the types of disasters for this area. For Sandy, we focus on Sandy's specific disasters and talk about, okay, what can we do in that situation? What could that look like? What could that look like for me and my family? And what can we do to prepare for that? We talk about general preparedness, tips, tricks, ideas, things that people don't think about. We do share kits that you can put together, but I also focus on those things that people don't think about that a lot of times slip their mind. One of those tips for preparedness. Question for you guys. Does everyone know their childhood friends' phone numbers? Does anyone have those memorized? You can raise your hand and put it in the chat.
Can you repeat that? Their childhood what?
Friends' phone numbers.
Childhood friends' phone numbers.
Because I can tell you every single friend and their phone number from fifth grade.
I only remember one plus my cousin.
Oh, hey, that's positive. But with that, does anyone know everyone's phone numbers now? I don't, because I just put it in my phone and say, call mom, call sister. I I never think about, okay, what are the phone numbers now? And if we had a major, let's say, earthquake and the power was out, my phone dies, how am I getting any of those phone numbers? That's something people don't think about putting in their kits is a list of everyone's phone numbers so that you can get a hold of them. That is an important part of a kit. Another part, and I'll admit this is probably a weakness of mine because of where I work. This is my favorite section is talking about the medical. We talk about ways that you can help people in when they need emergency care. So right now, and what you can do for those people that we call them delayed, that they can wait a minute. You need to help them, but it's not life or death. And so we go through the situations, what to do. We do a ton of practice. It's very practical based. And then we do a drill at the very end. Also, I apologize. I'm at work, so you can hear the calls going in. So that's what that sound is in the background. Another section, another favorite, is fire. We talk about how to put out small fires and we practice with fire extinguishers. We talk about what is the type of fire that is appropriate to put out because there's a lot of misnomers with fires and a lot of interesting things that we've seen as firefighters that people try and do. One of my very favorites that happened just recently is we had a fire and the family that had the fire was like, man, our fire extinguisher, it malfunctioned. It wasn't working. And we were like, oh, like what happened with this fire extinguisher? And they're like, well, I picked it up and pulled out the pin and I threw it in and it didn't do a thing. We were like, okay, well, let's do a little education here and talk about what you have to do with a fire extinguisher because in case you didn't know, you cannot throw a fire extinguisher at a fire and have it put out a fire. It's not going to work for you. So we talk about that and also how to deal with the utilities, how to deal with gas leaking, how to deal with power, and all of those different scenarios that could happen. The next section is search and rescue. So, how to find people, what's safe, what's not safe to go in to a house or to a building, how to make sure that you're not rushing into something unsafe, that you would get hurt. And then if you have to get people out, how are you going to get them out? If you're by yourself, if you're with other people, how can you create stretchers? How can you transition to get people out? What if people are panicked? How are you going to get them out? What are you going to do to help them be able to get out of this situation? And the last section that we talk about is fairly new in CERT. Well, maybe 10 years. It's been there, disaster psychology. So we talk about mental health and the effects afterwards and what you can do to assist others and assist yourself. This is one that I'm pretty passionate about, and I love this section because I think it's everyday applicable along with disasters, but how to better take care of yourself and others mentally. With that, I have a question for everyone, which feel free to unmute yourself or you can put it in the chat. What disasters do we have in the United States?
Wait,
Yep, earthquake, flood. I'm seeing floods in the chat.
fire.
Fire for sure. Oh my goodness, there have been so many. Power outage. And that is a disaster that a lot of people don't think about. Like, it's a major disaster when all your food goes bad. Totally happened to me recently. We had a giant windstorm in 2020, the worst year. And my neighborhood was out of power for 2 weeks. And although the whole city wasn't, I lost all my food. It was an expensive disaster for me. Tornado, I see as well. Civil unrest, oh my goodness. Yes, for sure. And that one can be scary. So there is a ton of different types of disasters. And with civil unrest, we can even say terrorism and all the effects that come from that. And that's something we discuss in CERT. It's not something that CERTs respond to, terrorism, but we talk about what to do if you're in a terrorist event and how to assist and help others in that. Oh, Nashville, bless you. Okay, so these are four disasters that are just from this year. There have been a lot. We got hurricanes, we have the park fire, we got all the tornadoes that happened in the central United States. That particular picture is from Oklahoma. We have tons of flooding that has happened throughout the United States. That picture is from Sioux Falls. So, with all of these, there's a lot of things that everyday people can do and be helpful with and assist with the survivors. So, I'm going to go into a couple of, as I said in the beginning, some of my very favorite things that we teach in CERT. So, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of details, but I want to share a couple that I enjoy. So, a lot of people talked about flooding. Flooding happens everywhere, regardless of where you live. Utah, if anyone doesn't know, is a desert, but we have flooding. Flash flooding is big in Utah. And a lot of people don't know that flash floods are the number one weather related death in the world. We saw that just barely happen with Spain for anyone that was following what was happening with the floods in Spain. Flooding is big, and people don't realize the power of water. I hear a lot of people say, well, I know how to swim. I'm fine. I can just swim out of it. I'm like, oh, can you? Have you ever been in a flash flood? With fast moving water, it only takes 6 inches. And I'm like, that doesn't even cover your whole foot of fast moving water to sweep you off your feet, enough that you can't swim through that. Only 1 foot for a car and only 2 feet for a semi. Oh, Roswell had a 123-year flood. Yeah, water is, and what it does in such a short amount of time of wiping away landscape that's been there forever, mountains that have been there forever, buildings that have not been there forever, but that power of that water just sweeps it away. So, something we talk about is you never walk or drive through floods. If you can avoid it because it can sweep you away a lot faster than people think it can. Another disaster, and this is one of my favorites. So I'm going to throw it out to you. Myth or truth? The doorway is the safest place to be in an earthquake. What do y'all think? You can definitely put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself. Well, Brent saying myth. Myth question mark? I don't know about you guys, but this is what I was taught in elementary school. You go under your desk, and if you're not by your desk, you go to the door. For years, I assumed that the door was the safest place to be in an earthquake. It is a myth. New construction doesn't hold, and that is exactly right. So, where this myth came from is when you see pictures of natural disasters in third world countries, the a lot of times the only thing left standing is the doorway. So this myth became perpetuated that the doorway is the safest place to be in an earthquake because that was the only thing left standing in this picture of this house. So that must be the safest place. It's really, really not. It's no safer than any other location in your house. In fact, the location, because of modern construction, the location where the door comes in the corner is actually one of the unsafest locations. It's not reinforced, it's not a safe place to be, and it's never a place that I would recommend anyone to go to in an earthquake. Also, as this picture shows, imagine if there's more than one of you. What are you all doing when you get to that doorway? The safest place to be is always underneath something, underneath a desk, a table. If you're in the middle of a field, even more better. That's a much safer place to be than in a doorway. Okay, let me talk just a moment about. Oh, yes, I agree with David. Safest place to be in an earthquake is outer space, 100%. Or natural voids, yes, but the triangle of life, for those of you that have heard about the triangle of life, that is one that has been debunked. Um, the reason being, it can be hard to predict as to, okay, it's going to fall in exactly this way, which is going to leave me this void. So, yes, if you can predict it right, which makes it harder. So, moving on to a little bit about CERT organization, I want to talk about how it works within the system. So, with CERT, when people come to a scene, in CERT, the first person that comes becomes the incident commander until people with more authority come. So a lot of times that's going to be the city, the fire department, the emergency management team or manager, depending on the size of your city. And then from there, that person will assign people to where they go. Operations is where a lot of this are in the operation, meaning I need you to search this neighborhood. I need you to find out which houses are safe, who needs more help. If there are people that have serious injuries, if there are people that have minor injuries, or what houses are collapsed, not safe, what areas of this, like what's happening. So that is where CERT comes in, is to kind of the bodies of people to get to these areas and respond. When I say this, I want to give a little bit of a caveat. My caveat is it totally depends on where you live as to how exactly CERT fits within the system. I say that because in Sandy, there has been some reconfiguring of how CERT looks within the city. And so a lot of our CERT training currently is about how to help your family in your neighborhood, not necessarily responding to the city. That said, I know a lot of cities do still have CERTs coming into the city to respond to a disaster. So with that, CERT will talk about, okay, how do I fit within the system and how can I be the most assistance? Okay, moving on to disaster medical. This part of the course, I really focus on doing the FEMA CERT because that's where CERT comes from, is FEMA, in case you didn't know. And I want to use the most updated resources that are available. So we talk a lot about Stop the Bleed. That, for anyone that hasn't heard of that, it's an amazing program. It's something we teach. We're a huge proponent of that. The number one preventable, I'm going to say that word, preventable death in the United States is uncontrolled bleeding. Meaning, had that bleeding been controlled, that person wouldn't have passed away. So we use a lot of those things when talking about bleeding and what you can do to respond. Something that we talk about to people is a lot of times when I ask someone, okay, someone's bleeding, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to go find the cleanest, most sanitary thing that I have, and that's what I'm going to use. A lot of times in that situation, you don't have the time. You don't have the time to be able to go find that sanitary, clean, amazing thing that you have or the gauze that you have. You need to stop that bleeding immediately. When Stop the Bleed came out and I was trained in it, I was trained at the University of Utah Hospitals, which is one of the hospitals that was a main proponent and starter of Stop the Bleed. And when they told me about it, I said, no, because we need to make sure they're not getting infection. Because as firefighters, we don't just put anything on a wound. We're going to use the sanitary gauze and dressings. And here's what the hospital told me. You know what? We can help someone that has an infection. We cannot help someone that's already passed away because they lost too much blood. So this is about opening people's perspectives of you can use towels, dish rags, clothes, scarves, socks, whatever you got around you. One thing that I always tell people is if you have multiple people that you're helping, multiple people that are injured, use their clothes and not yours because then you're naked by the third person. That's never fun. So just a little, tip, trick, use their clothes, but be creative. You can use a lot of different things to stop bleeding, but that pressure is the number one way to stop bleeding. More than anything else is pressure. Another tip that I really enjoy, we talk about all the types of injuries that can wait. A shoulder injury, yes, it hurts, and that person is in pain, and they're going to tell you that they're dying. They're not. So it's something that can wait. So once we've treated all of the people that need help immediately or they will pass away, we go to the non emergent injuries. The shoulder injury is one of them. I don't know about you guys, but if anyone has ever tried to do a triangle bandage when you're in the moment and it's stressful and you haven't done a lot of triangle bandages, it's hard. Suddenly you're like, wait, how does this, wait, how am I supposed I've seen so many really, really interesting ways that people have tried to tie a triangle bandage. So, this is one of my very favorite tips. On the second picture, you'll see on the right, we use a t shirt. All we did is we got a t shirt that we cut off. Oh, it's going to cut it off. Okay, we cut off the arms of the t shirt. So, all you have to do is you throw it around. And obviously, you wouldn't move their shoulder as much as I just moved mine. But you put it right in, and it's soft and super, super easy to put on. You can get t shirts. We wash them. And in my kit, I have extra large, large, because someone that needs extra large t shirt, the small one is not going to work on them. But then that is a really soft way for someone to have a shoulder rather than
Question.
trying to figure out triangle bandage.
So you cut off the arms, and then did you put your head through one of the armholes? Is that what you did?
Nope. So
Or did you
this is
put it
just the
through the neck
bottom
hole?
part of the t-shirt.
The neck hole. Okay.
So there's no neck, there's no arms. I cut it off from like the chest down. So it's
Oh,
just the
okay. Oh,
bottom
I
half of the
see.
t-shirt.
So it's just a big tube, kind of.
Yeah. And then it just goes right over the person and it's so soft. So try if you're like questioning me, try to put on a triangle bandage and put your arm in it and feel what that feels like on your neck. Try a t-shirt and feel what that feels like. It's like night and day difference. So just a tip because everyone has t-shirts and that's something that you could totally use. Find an old t-shirt, cut off the top, and then you automatically have a shoulder sling, which is pretty cool. So, one tip there. Sorry, crews are so busy today. Okay, another thing we talk about is splinting. Again, maybe this is coming from my youth. I don't know. But when I was taught splinting growing up as a teenager, I was always taught you find two sticks and you put it on the person. I don't know about you guys. If you've ever had a stick tied to your arm or leg, it is not comfortable. And after about 10 seconds of that stick being on you, you are uncomfortable and you feel like this is worse. So we use a lot of other options that work as splints. One that people usually don't think about is a magazine. You can put like a t-shirt or a blanket or a soft cloth underneath the magazine, but that magazine, the hard part of it, works as a splint. Pillows can work as a soft splint. We even can use cardboard because cardboard can be molded around a person's limb. So you can see in that picture with the elbow, you can mold it to come around. But if you ever do that, a tip, I would definitely pad the inside of it so that it's a little bit more comfortable. So we talk about ideas for how to help with broken bones and what to do with that. Okay, this one's a little bit silly, but when we are talking about search and rescue, something that people don't realize is people tend to hide. Not necessarily intentionally that they're trying to hide from you, but a lot of times when people get really panicked or nervous or worried, they hide. Something that a lot of people don't know is the number one place that us as firefighters find kids in a fire is in the closet. In the closet and under the bed because they're scared. There's smoke, there's a really loud noise that's happening. If they have smoke alarms, hopefully. There's it's hot and they hide. They they don't know what to do and they hide. So we talk about different places to look for people under beds, next to beds, in cupboards. Cupboards is a common one, in closets and bathtubs. Look for places that people tend to hide. And an example I'd give of that is if you're going to your neighbors and you're checking on your neighbor, you know that your neighbor is usually home at this time of night. Look in those places to make sure that you can find them and that you've checked the whole thing and not just said, oh, they're not here, and then find out later that they had hid because they were worried, scared, nervous, all of those things. This one is interesting. It's something as firefighters, whenever we go to a scene, so a fire, the captain, so that's the person that's in charge at the fire, his first duty is he does a 360 around the house, meaning he walks around the whole house, see what dangers are happening, to see if there's any pillows or anything that has been thrown from any of the windows, meaning someone's trapped up there. They're looking in all the windows. That's their job because they need to make sure that we're going into the scene safely and to make sure that we know we're aware of all the hazards. This picture is actually of a house here in Utah, and in the city right next to us. There was halfway is now, a community that was built right on a bluff. And unfortunately, the builders of this community did not build it according to code, meaning the sand beneath the bluff has completely worn away. And this was one of the houses. This happened last year, right? 2023. Yeah, last year. So you can see on the bottom part, that round picture, that's what it looks like from the front. And if you're walking up to that as a CERT and assuming, oh, I'm going to check on my neighbor. And you walk in that door and you fall down that cliff. From the front, if you were standing there, not like the bird's eye view, you can't tell that that whole back half of that house is missing. That's something that we talk about with situational awareness is making sure, okay, do I know what's happening? Do I know what's happening with this house? And I'm not just walking blindly and falling down. As firefighters, we call that tunnel vision. It's something that is super easy to happen that we just get so worried and nervous and we're walking towards something and not paying attention to what's happening. So, safety, a lot of it is with safety. Okay, disaster psychology, again, one of my favorites. We talk about coping skills. One of the best ways to help yourself in a disaster is to know what your coping skills are now. Because after a disaster happens and after you're worried and nervous and scared and wondering what's going on is not the time to think about it. And that's what people are thinking. Oh, I'll think about that later. I'll worry about that later. But that's not the moment to think about it. So we encourage people, okay, what are your coping skills? And we give them a huge variety of options to think about. This is actually something that we have also added in a little bit to our school programs. So we go into fifth grade. This is what we talk about in fifth grade is mental health. And we got part of it from CERT because it's something that's happening a lot more and that people need to know and find out about and what's happening with yourself. Because I will say, since 2020 was a huge leap for us in psychological calls, suicidal person or threats of suicide, mental health breakdowns, and the numbers have just kept increasing. So that's something that I feel really passionate about and want to talk about. So, one of the questions we ask is, what brings you joy? What makes you happy? How can you have that within your life so that you can have that joy? I want to share a 10-second video that brings me joy. I know it's a little bit blurry, but it's my very favorite. So please enjoy. Who doesn't need quadruplets laughing? I mean, if you're ever having a bad day, look that up because they're awesome. And it just makes me really happy. So that's something that we talk about is a huge variety of things that you can use in order to help yourself and your family after disaster mentally. So with that, my takeaways for everyone is if you haven't taken CERT, I would encourage you to take CERT. There's a QR code at the top that will find a CERT program anywhere in the United States. The one at the bottom is if you happen to live in Utah, please come to our course if you want to hear more from me. I really enjoy it. It's a 6-week class and it's just a lot of fun. So, if anyone has questions or comments or anything, feel free to ask or write in the chat, and I can stay to answer whatever questions you have. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. That's a lot of great information. I do have a couple of questions myself. What is the certification process and how long does it take?
So it's just attending the class. So the certification for CERT is there's not a test as there is with like CPR. It is coming, attending the class, and participating in all of the different things that we have. The certification does not expire, although I do encourage people to take it if it's been a long time since they've taken it last, to be reminded of those skills that you don't use on a daily basis.
So anyone can join CERT.
Yep.
Um, what would trigger a CERT activation?
Any
And how
major
would the
disaster.
volunteers be notified?
So it totally, again, depends on the city as to how that would work out. And depends on the area that you're at. Here in Sandy, with CERT, we talk about how to help your family and your neighborhood. Um, in Sandy, Utah specifically, and a lot of areas in Utah, there is a really active church community. So the leaders in each neighborhood actually, a lot of them go through that community because they are asked to be in those positions, if that makes sense. So, Sandy, that's the way that they work is through that system. And I know that each city is totally different. So it just depends on where you live. And that's something that if you're not sure, if you have the CERT certification, you're not sure how CERTs would be notified in your area, I would encourage you to reach out to your CERT in your area to find out what would that look like.
Okay, great. Did you say how long it takes to be certified?
So we
It's a
do it in a
class, is it?
6 week class.
Okay, 6 weeks. Is it
Mhm.
like a once a week class?
So once a week. So here we do a Tuesday nights from 6 to 8:30.
Do you certify for CPR in your classes?
We do not certify for CPR in the class, but anyone that is certified can get the CPR class for just the price of the card, or they can come to it for free if they don't want the card. So
And where do they come for that?
here at the
At,
fire department
at the
in
fire
Sandy.
department. Okay.
Yeah, the normal class is $54, but for certs it's $17 for life is the way that we do it. And I won't say that that's the way for everywhere in the United States, but that's what we decided to do.
Also, do CERT members need to renew their training?
It's
Is
not
it just for life?
required, but I do recommend it.
How often would they need to do that?
I would say most of our certs come back every about 5 to 10 years. That's when I typically am re-seeing all my certs. They're like, okay, it's time. I can't remember. I'm like, great. I'm so happy that you're here again.
Once you're certified, do you have a shirt or a hat or anything that designates that you're certified?
So there is CERT gear that you can buy. We do not give it to everyone because my budget is this big.
We do sell
But
those
we do
CERT
have a
kits on our
discount.
website. I'll put
And
a link
yes,
right here in the chat. This is a CERT starter kit. But Bruce, don't you have a little card that says you're um, CERT member? There it is. Oh, it's upside
I,
down. There we go. So
good
that's what
job.
you get a little card like that and you can carry it around.
Yep.
So, Kimberly, when you're talking about stopping the bleeding, I would imagine you guys have the CAT, right? The Combat Application Tourniquet, and that's been a huge breakthrough in
Oh yeah.
stopping the bleeding.
Yeah, for sure. And we practice with the tourniquet. Everyone practices on each other so that they can feel what it feels like. We got permission from the hospital, so don't worry. But everyone puts it on each other because I want them to feel what that feels like because a lot of people are really hesitant when they put a tourniquet on and put it on really lightly. And I'm like, that's not going to help. So we talk about how to appropriately put on a tourniquet.
Yeah, and the wonder of the CAT is that a 10-year-old can do it in 10 seconds.
Yeah,
I mean,
100%.
it's the best. It's absolutely the best at stopping bleeding.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the one that I recommend to everyone.
And it's important to keep it on your visor because if your car ever flips or your truck flips, you want to make sure you're able to get to it.
Yep, that's a great tip.
Is there any advanced training available in the CERT process?
That's a really great question. We do not have any here in Sandy. The more advanced training that I recommend that people take is the wilderness survival. So, like the wilderness CPR, that is going to be a step above medically that I would recommend to people beyond, and it will teach a lot more of those skills. So, that's the one that I recommend.
Did you say wilderness survival?
Wilderness survival slash CPR. First aid. First aid is what it would be. CPR.
And where would that be available?
If I used to recommend places, and the two places that I recommended went out of business, so I would suggest Googling it.
A place where I think CERT is invaluable is in a situation like Hurricane Helene, where it's a catastrophic biblical event. It frees up the professionals, the firefighters and the sheriffs and the others to be able to do their work. And just simple things like if they can go around to a house that's obviously gone and just put the X on it, or the car or truck and put an X on it, then that helps. That kind of tedious task, it's simple task, but it frees up the firefighters and the sheriffs to be able to do their job. So, I just looked it up on Grok, and they say 600,000 people have taken the training, but that doesn't mean that. Because I was trying to get a number for this year, and it doesn't show it. It just shows total 600,000 people have taken it. So that's good, but I'd love to see that number in the millions.
Oh yeah, for sure, 100%. And that's exactly it. That's exactly where it's helpful because then we can take care of those big giant things
Right.
and know where to go next. Yep.
Great. Any more questions from anyone? Did you recommend a brand of type of tourniquet? I heard a brand mentioned. Was that from Kimberly or Bruce?
Well, so the type of tourniquet to get that we would definitely recommend is a CAT, C-A-T, combat application tourniquet. I would recommend having one that is medically certified. That is where I would go with that. So when you're looking for one, I would make sure that it has been through those medical checks.
And I'm fortunately I'm blanking, but there's a company in South Carolina. It was a bunch of special forces guys that came back from Afghanistan, and they founded their own company to make sure that they had the best medical equipment. I wish I could remember, but anyway, theirs is good. It's the one I buy. It's
Okay.
great. I actually have a Substack on it, but I can't. Unfortunately, I can't remember the name.
That's awesome. And the other thing I would say with a tourniquet is if you purchase one, don't use that one to practice. If you ever want to practice with one, have a different one that you practice with because it breaks it down. So make sure that you don't practice with your tourniquets, that you leave them nice for when you need them.
How many would you recommend that we carry with us? Just one?
Totally depends on, I would say, the size of your family. I would make sure that you have enough that you can help your family, but don't feel like you got to go buy hundreds of tourniquets to help everyone in the world.
Yeah.
Right. No, I just got the name. It's North American Rescue.
Okay.
North American
They're a big
Rescue,
company.
and they have incredible military grade packs, first aid kits. In fact, my wife fell in the pool and broke her ankle. It had a wonderful splint in it, so I was able to splint her up and get her to the emergency room. So their products are just the best, the absolute best. So North American Rescue.
Awesome.
Any more questions?
Thank you very much, Kimberly. This is very educational.
Yeah,
I
this
hope it was helpful. Thank you guys. Thanks for inviting me.
is super great. I just want to mention that in our recent Journal of Civil Defense titled Emergency Planning, we do have a section on CERT. So there's a lot of information there. It's in the back, page 29. So I put a link for that in the chat. And in the future, we hope to have a CERT page on our website so that we can encourage people joining CERT and getting involved in their community and helping make their community a safer place. So with that, I think we'll end here right on time. Thank you so much, Kimberly. This has been really, really informative. We appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. Have a great night. Bye-bye.
Bye.